It's good to see everyone this morning, and I hope you're feeling well. Welcome to this Unitarian Universalist congregation service. My name is Ernie Mills, and you can call me Ernie. I prefer that over Reverend. If you call me Reverend, I'll call you Reverend back. First of all, any announcements? Does anyone? Thomas.
Good morning, folks. Elisa asked me to make a comment about the scheduled 5th Sunday in December, which is December 31st or New Year's Eve. And we requested responses from the congregation regarding whether they would want to hold a service or not. And we did get a number of respondents coming in and saying because of a variety of reasons, family, out of town, not available, that the majority indicated that they did not want a service. We met as a board last week and made a decision that since we did have a majority of respondents in the negative, that the decision was made not to have a Sunday, December 31st service, but to rejoin, I believe it's January 7th, which is the first Sunday in January 2024. So I'm sure we'll talk about it more before the 31st of December, but I just wanted to let everybody know the results of the emails.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Any other announcements?
I have 3. First of all, please sign up to help be greeter, be chalice lighter, or help provide food. Secondly, our board voted to donate 10 $25 gift cards to outreach. So that has been done. And third, if you have something for outreach and you want me to take it and deliver it, there is a bag over on the sign-in table. But anyway.
Thank you, Rich. Anyone else have an announcement? All right. Do we have any visitors this morning who would feel comfortable introducing themselves to us? We won't make you do anything after that. But
my name is Pat Jobe, and I am the minister of All Souls in Forest City. And a couple from this congregation came over 4 years ago to help kick us off. Was it you two? No, y'all didn't come.
Yeah, we were at the mountain.
We saw you at the mountain.
We were at the mountain together. Okay, great. Well, anyway, we owe a tremendous debt to this congregation and to folks from Spartanburg, and even one woman came up from Bluffton to help us with our first service 4 years ago. We had 35 people. We've never had that many since, as you can imagine. And if y'all will indulge me for just a second, after watching your service from 2 weeks ago, I was inspired. I was beside myself. I was overwhelmed. So I wrote this. It is often amazing to me that whether we gather hundreds of thousands, likely not millions, but hundreds of thousands all over the world, gather in UU congregations. We light the same chalices and candles. We sing many of the same songs, and we affirm our diversity even as we gather in unity. We are like the world. Although we are mostly white, we gather in racial diversity. Although we are mostly straight, we affirm LGBTQ equality. And although we are mostly intellectual lovers of ideas, we affirm the power of emotions to draw us together in common cause. But most importantly, we are daughters and sons of individuality who allow all kinds of outlandish personalities and speech, who are sometimes completely undone by our differences, yet still allowing, still accepting, still embracing our willingness to be together. A group of UU women in their 90s were once asked what drew them to UUism. One of them said, and the rest agreed, "I just didn't fit in anywhere else." Praise be that we didn't fit in anywhere else. And I wrote after listening to your brilliant minister talk about scallops.
If you would have said that a couple of hundred years ago, they'd have burned you at the stake.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Any other, thank you, Pat. Any other visitors this morning? Feel free to come. Yes, sir.
Charles Douglas.
Charles.
Douglas, UUFCF.
Thank you, Charles. Good to have you with us this morning. Charles was telling me he's from the United Methodist Church down the way. So I hope we're not too radical for you.
Darla.
Darla? Good to have you with us, Darla.
Thank you.
Darla
So
tells
glad
me
to be
she's
here.
from Tryon, so she's from North Carolina. How many South Carolinians do we have in this congregation?
Isn't that funny?
And the rest of you are North Carolinians? Not that it makes a big difference, but just curious. Any other visitors? Okay. It's good to have you all with us. I said that already. I'll say it again. And I hope you enjoy your time here this morning. We'll sing a new song to the eternal. Shout praise, all earth, break into music and song. Praise the eternal with lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder, praise the world and its inhabitants. Let rivers clap their hands. Let mountains sing in chorus. Oh, sing a new song to the eternal. Our opening hymn is number 67, in honor, in memory of Thanksgiving. 67, the title is, We Sing Now Together.
How many verses?
How many verses do you all want to sing? All of them?
1, 2.
Let's sing the first one and the last one.
Okay.
And just keep seated. We don't stand up. Thank you. Dawn's going to light our chalice for us this morning.
Go ahead, I'll do the
Bob is going to do it, okay?
Okay. I can't do the gizmo though.
No? Let's see if I can.
No, broken thumb,
Okay, you can do this.
yes.
Would you want to support?
Welcome. Okay, I have 2 quotes, one for us and one for Ernie. This quote is by Albert Einstein. There are 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And I'm thinking of miracles, and sometimes we really need them. And Ernie has shared some of the ups and downs he's having to go through right now, and I thought that we all have those, especially during holiday times. This is by Maya Angelou. You may not control all of the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them.
Nice. Thank you, Robbie. If you all will join with me in our reading after chalice lighting. We light the chalice of the light of truth. We light the chalice of the warmth of love. We light the chalice of the energy of action. We light the chalice of harmony of peace. This is a welcoming community where we find a connection, a spiritual community where we find meaning. This is a sharing community. Here we share our joys, our concerns with each other. We are a caring community where our joys are shared, our sorrows are lessened. So we take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge our mutual support of each other in this community. If you have a joy or concern you'd like to share, raise your hand and Becky will bring the microphone to you. Does anyone have a joy, concern, or sorrow they'd like to share this morning with us? David.
I have something that's not so much a sorrow as a dismay, and I agree with what Ernie had to say about the caring aspect of this community, which is full of many nonprofits doing good work. But the other day I went into a fairly well-known retailer in the area, and I saw this flyer in the window. I think there's a lot of nonprofits that do fundraisers, and they have their flyers for that. But this flyer had the profile of an AK-47 rifle on it. And it was promoting a local organization, I won't name them, who's having a raffle for an assault rifle. And it dismayed me. I just thought that seemed so inconsistent with the spirit of this community as we know it, and I hope we can find ways to perhaps absorb that and have it come out better than it might otherwise.
Thank you, David. That's a concern shared by many, many people. Thank you. Yes, Nancy, Becky. Oh, I'm sorry, Robin.
I have two sorrows that are making their way to joy. One is that the Mustaki family, as we know, we support them, and Riziki's mom got a flu shot and had a terrible reaction and had to go to the hospital.
Wow.
And she's home, but she's still in a lot of pain, so
Wow.
she needs our thoughts and prayers. And the other is that Roman, our Ukrainian connection who helps us take our funds over there to Ukraine to good use, maybe 3 or 4 months ago fell at a construction site and broke his leg. And his church there has been wonderful to support his family while he couldn't work. But she said, I'm really running out of money, I have to go to work, so he's just going to have to grin and bear through the pain still. So keep him in your thoughts.
Nancy back there. Thank you, Robin.
I just discovered when I was looking for the newsletter in the mail on my computer, that one of my very best friends and also a coworker for 25 years walked out in front of a car and got hit. And she broke her arms, ribs, one of her legs, and she's really in bad shape. So she lives alone. She's spinster, I guess you say, person that's never been married. And she doesn't really have anybody, take care of her, so she had to go into a nursing home in order to, be able to recover and be taken care of properly. So I just wanted to say her name out loud. Her name is Barbara Miller. And I'm hoping that she's gonna be okay, at least it'll take a while. She's a fighter, so she probably will be, I hope.
My concern is about the myth, since we talk about myths often, about the myths surrounding Thanksgiving. It was actually, the Day of Thanks was actually suggested to Lincoln after the Civil War. And the truth is that the Wampanoag natives in Massachusetts were exposed to disease, massacred, and just as natives were here, removed from their land. And I thought I'd suggest a little bit, I mentioned before in a previous UU meeting we had about this being hunting lands for the Cherokee, and this is in the history. The area which Tryon and surrounding area now occupies was originally part of Cherokee hunting grounds in western North Carolina. Archaeological evidence dates indigenous peoples' occupation of the site to the end of the last ice age, more than 11,000 years ago. Successive cultures occupied the river valleys. Semi-permanent villages appeared in that area about 8,000 BC. They later developed towns with a democratic political structure, developing religion, domesticated crops, pottery, and skilled and powerful archery. The culture developed cultivated vegetables and hunted and fished. And there was a wonderful common read, UU common read, in the year 2019 to 20 that I recommend for everybody that really sheds light on the whole situation. It's called An Indigenous People's History of the United States. An absolutely fascinating book. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Anyone else have something? Jim, I think.
I have two items. First is a sorrow. My camping trailer was stolen out of a place that you park in. It has a gate and surveillance and all that stuff. The next item, I don't know whether it's a sorrow or blessing yet, but this afternoon, Dawn, see right here, Dawn and I are driving 30 cats to Minneapolis so that they can hopefully get a forever home.
Did you say 30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Do you have any nose plugs or
You get gallery. Whose car are you gonna wreck?
Yeah.
Anybody else have something they'd like to share?
Yeah.
Annie?
Well, this is an appeal since our Ukrainian friend that Robin has been in contact with, and we've been sending our donations. Couldn't we take up a special donation today? We can maybe use one of the houses, and everybody donate what you can so that we can send to him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's being forced to go back to work when he's not physically really ready to do that, and that will interfere with his healing.
So I'm not sure.
That's up to you guys.
Thank you for that suggestion. I'm not sure how we can do that. Pass one offering plate and then pass another. Does that work to do
Not
that?
just pass it, it'd just be sitting here.
Oh, I see, okay.
And during the, after the service.
Okay. That works. Thank you.
There a
Does
way
any-
you can get the money to him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She does that all the time.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Well, let's spend the next few moments in silence and lifting up in our thoughts and or prayers the sorrows, the joys that were shared with us, and those that we know are held in our hearts but not shared openly. Join with me in our response. We rejoice together and we grieve together as one. Help us to remember that every human heart holds its own joys and sorrows. Let's continue our service with our offering. And we're going to play a song here. I think, are the words going to be on?
Yeah. You can't read those words. You can have a piece of paper that has the words on them. You want to just pass that back in case anybody wants it?
Oh, it's your five, your song.
Okay.
Sweet song, yes.
Sing with us if you can. Hold back the days in which I'm living, so far from home, so far from free. Hold back the ways we've all been given, and let us sweet song from yesterday wash over me. If we should be like ships of passing some stormy night upon the blue, we may not see the forecasting. I let us sweet song from yesterday wash over you. Back the days in which I'm living, so far from home, so far from free. Hold back the ways we've all been given, and let us sweet song from yesterday wash over me. And when your dreams ain't worth the dreaming, and when you can find your way through, when all your schemes ain't worth the scheming, just let us sweet song from yesterday wash over you. Roll back the days in which I'm living, so far from home, so far from free. Roll back the days we've all been given, and let us sweet song from yesterday wash over me.
We don't always know how we're going to bring the song to an end. We just got to make sure it- I think it ended. When we play music sitting down, we can always do like that. Just put the brakes on, and we're coming to a close. Let's just take a minute or two. What's your sweet song of yesterday? Does anybody want to share? As you like washes over you when you're feeling down and out? You have a sweet song from yesterday? Anybody?
Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road.
Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. Yes. Where the dogs of society howl.
Not plant me in your penthouse. I'm going back to my place.
Oh, yeah. That's about getting away from Wall Street, right? Yeah, the wolves of Wall Street.
Imagine.
Imagine by John Lennon. That's a good one. Anybody else? I like, oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling nothing is going my way. quote, or I'm going to read it if we don't have it. I was going to put it up on there. If we don't, that's fine, I'll read it. Oh, it's up there. Okay, sorry about that.
By this time?
Yeah, by this time. I'm going to read, this is from Lin Yutang's The Importance of Living. It was written some time ago, I don't really know the name. He was raised in China by Christian parents, and he was sent off to seminary at a certain age. And after some time in seminary, the bishop told his parents he's not fit for seminary because he's asking too many questions. And so he wrote this book later on. He converted from Christianity back to the faith of his ancestors, which is Taoism. But he wrote this book, and this is an excerpt from his book. And I'm going to read it to you, even though it's up there, you can read it. And after I read it, I'm just going to ask for, it would take a minute just if anybody wants to respond to that. By this time, I had already arrived at the position that the Christian theologians were the greatest enemies of the Christian religion. I could never get over two contradictions, great contradictions. The first was that the theologians had made the entire structure of the Christian belief hang upon the existence of an apple. If Adam had not eaten the apple, there would be no original sin. And if there was no original sin, there would be no need for redemption. That was plain to me, whatever the symbolic value of the apple might be. This seemed to be preposterously unfair to the teachings of Christ, who never said a word about original sin or redemption. All I know is that if God loves me half as much as my mother does, He will not send me to hell. That is a final fact of my inner consciousness, and for no religion could I deny its truth. Just to take a minute or two, anybody have anything they want to, just be brief, but to react to that reading? Yes?
I saw a meme this week that said, if Adam and Eve had been Cajuns, they'd have eaten the snake and we'd all look perfect humanity.
Did everybody hear that back there? Did y'all hear that? Right. If Adam and Eve would have eaten the snake instead of the apple, we wouldn't have all these problems. If they were Cajun. Oh boy. David.
I want to know why Eve is left out of this equation.
Good question. Excellent question.
What was the original sin? Was it her succumbing to the serpent's guile, or his, succumbing to his guile by her?
That we could spend the rest of the time talking about that mythology and what goes on there. Yeah, and the serpent and all of that. But that's a good question, David.
I think the snake, the serpent, it was the symbol of wisdom in mythology. Again, Joseph Campbell would explain it so much, that was a symbol of wisdom.
Yes.
And it's so contradictory. As a child growing up, it's like, wait a minute. So it was better that they both were ignorant about things?
Yes.
It was, and of course, you couldn't mention that, or if you mentioned it once, that was all you could ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it also represents the tremendous shift from matriarchal culture and matriarchal consciousness to patriarch and the fathers. But I mean, we could spend a lot of time on that. I love to get inside that mythology and play with it. Mythology is almost like a playground, and the thing is, don't reject it. Is get inside and try to figure out what they're trying to say and what it might mean. But anyway, that's an interesting. It's Prometheus in Greek mythology who stole fire from the gods and paid for it, which was the original sin. And anyway, I don't want to talk about that. I want to give you all. Anybody else want to respond to that?
I think the thing that attracts me the most to UU is that I don't have to have a theologian tell me what my path is, my spiritual path is to God. I don't have to tell anybody else what theirs is.
Yeah.
Just so long as you find one of your own to get there,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. You know how to scare a theologian and a bishop? Tell them what you think. I'm serious. Tell them what you think, because they don't want to hear that. That's what I think, and only what I think. We'll talk about that in a moment. But yes, the whole question of Eve is David. That's a whole other thing there. But it was Eve, as you all know, that saw the apple, ate it, gave it to Adam. But she didn't just give Adam an apple, she gave him an apple pie, and he couldn't resist. So anyway, and by the way, the word fall is not in that story, neither is the word sin in that story. Those concepts were laid later by theologians to talk about the fall of humankind and the need for redemption as a result of the fall of humankind. We'll explore that. As Yutang says in here, to understand the need for redemption, you have to go back to the story of the fall, because redemption only makes sense if there was a fall. And so again, that word was added later by theologians to talk about the fall of humankind, which, you know, is it's what it says. The humans fell, not only humans, but all of nature, according to the story, fell into this place of what eventually becomes known as bondage and enslavement to sin. And of course, at that point, you remember God is walking in the garden with Adam and Eve, and they're tilling God's garden. But after this incident, God moves away from earth and up into the heavens. God packs his bag and says, I'm out of here. So there's now this huge gulf and this separation. According to biblical religion, there's this huge gulf and separation between humans and gods. And humans have to devise all sorts of ways to atone or reconcile and create some kind of relationship with this deity who's flown away and now lives up in heaven, the Father up in heaven. Create the sacraments, create prayers, create all these things to relate to this God and atone for their sin. Now, there are Eastern religions. A biblical religion is a religion of how to relate to the deity. In some Eastern religions, it's not about relation, it's about identity. You identify with the God. You are the God. But in Western thought, we have this whole history of humans trying to figure out how to relate to this deity who lives up in heaven. Before we go any further, though, I want to talk about, there's another myth that precedes that, and that's the mythology of a God, of a Father who demands a strict obedience to his will and his command. And that's not true of other gods and other religions, but it's true of this religion. This God, like a father, demands that his children do exactly as he says. Don't eat from the tree. In fact, Yahweh says don't even touch it. Don't even touch it. And of course, Eve's disobedience. And according to the theologian Karl Barth, women are the cause for all the evil in the world. But it's all going back to you women just mess everything up. And that's a typical patriarchal, we won't go there, we're going to leave that alone. This whole thing, when you think about that story, you get inside and you play with it, and what the theologians who developed that story are trying to do is explain, they're simply trying to explain why bad things happen. When I suffer, or when I've experienced pain or tragedy, why does that happen? What's the cause behind that? So one of the, it's very unfortunate in our society that we refer to myth as lies, because I think in doing that, we're really not getting into the understanding of mythology, but ourselves as well. The whole mythological world is living in our subconscious. Mythology forms the substrata of the conscious mind. That's why myth and dreams are very similar. All that mythic world that's based upon instincts and emotions is still within us. It's not out there in the past, it's in here. And if we cut that, if we say myth is a lie, we're saying in a sense that our emotional, instinctual lives are lies. But, I mean, we can explore that later, but the question of the meaning, of what is the meaning of life? Particularly, what is the meaning of our suffering? You know, some people call human suffering trials and tribulations, which means that all our suffering and pain and the tragedy of our lives is only a way that God tries us. And through these tribulations, we are in many ways redeemed or saved. I visited a man one time who had an inoperable brain tumor. And I stood by his bedside and he said to me, God has given me this tumor to purify me so that I can go to heaven when I die. And, you know, I started to say something, but then I thought, well, he's comforted by that. So don't take that away from him. He believes that. But I mean, the question is really the search. You know, Viktor Frankl says that the search for meaning is a basic, fundamental human thing. And it's part of what makes us human is that we search for meaning. And I think that we don't necessarily question what is the meaning of joy and happiness, but we do question what is the joy of human, what is the meaning of human suffering and pain. And here's your answer. Here's the way these theologians answer the question. You suffer and you experience pain because you're a sinner. You've sinned. Adam and Eve sinned. And that sin has been passed through the blood. You inherited it. That's the doctrine of original sin. You inherited that. Now, when you think about sin, don't think about individual sins, because by the time you get to the theologian Paul, he's not talking about acts of sin. He's talking about sin as a fundamental, basic human nature. It's your condition, which later develops through Augustine into you're born corrupt. The total, absolute corruption. And the only way out of that bondage to corruption is through some act of atonement. And first it's the law. God gives us the law. We obey the law, and good things will happen. I mean, that's the whole Hebrew Bible. Good things happen when we're good. Bad things happen when we're bad. And let me tell you, that theology is still alive and well today. If you suffer, it's because you offended God. You know, that's what was said about people with AIDS. They're suffering because God is punishing them for their sins. So don't think this mythology is old and outdated. This is alive and living today. You know, we still refer to natural disasters as acts of God. God did it. You know, who was it Robinson? Is that his name? This Robinson guy, the evangelist, said that this little town in Mississippi was... Pat Robertson, this little town in Mississippi God was going to punish them because there was a judge in that town that said the teachers could teach evolution. And God's going to punish those people. So the question is very paramount on our minds. Why do we suffer? And they give us an answer. You suffer because you're a sinner. Why do we die? Why death? Where did death come? You know, it's again back to that mythology. Adam and Eve were supposed to live for all eternity. They sinned and they brought death into the world. Another experience I had was the death of my brother-in-law. Some years ago, I went to a little very conservative church where it says memorial. First thing the minister said, he died because he was a sinner. And again, some of us find that comforting. You know, we die because we're sinners. The story of the fall explains it all. We suffer and die because Eve and Adam sinned and offended the deity. And for that, we need to be redeemed. Now, the word redemption comes from the word redeem. In ancient Israel, in ancient cultures, redeeming was simply the act of paying for a slave to free that slave from bondage. That's what the word redeem means. I'm going to pay for your, say Derek's been put in jail, I'm going to bail him out. I'm going to pay for you to be freed from your bondage. That's what redemption means. It's an economic term. You just take a religious tradition, you tie it to an economic necessity, pay your debts. Pay your debts. You owe. Now, most people don't know this because nobody ever talks about it much. But in Exodus, there's a law that if you're in debt, you can sell your son or your daughter into slavery to pay your debts. That's a law in Exodus. People say we should obey the laws of the Bible. Okay, well, let's sell our children and pay our debts. It's that simple. Don't question it, do it. We don't do that these days. We don't sell our children. And by the way, the little boys got more for boys than you did girls. They wanted boys, and the girls weren't worth a whole lot. That's an Exodus. I'm not making it up. So you pay your debts. You owe God. You got to pay your debts. The Hebrew Bible, you pay God, you owe God, you obey His laws, you pay His debts, everything's hunky-dory. Now, all of ancient Israel's history is interpreted through that lens, so much so that you just kind of get so monotonous. Israel, ancient Israel, they do good, things good, God's good. They commit a sin, they do something wrong, God punishes them. They get redeemed, they do something, they're redeemed. That history repeats itself over. Never forget this. Myth determines history. We interpret history through the lens of mythologies. And that myth drove ancient history to the point where the wisdom writers, you get the wisdom writer, and they say, we're sick and tired of that. We're sick and tired of that theology. Job, the book of Job, is a direct attack on that theology. If you know the story of Job, he's all this suffering, and all his friends are going, you need to find the sin. You need to look for a sin, and that will explain why you're suffering. And Job says, no, I haven't done anything. It was in this story, but it's an attack against that old theology of you get what you deserve, and you're suffering because you must have done something to offend the deity. Now I'm skipping through all that, we get to the Apostle Paul. Let me tell you, the Apostle Paul is a control freak. He's a control freak. He's a type A control freak. He loves power. And let me tell you this. The dogma of original sin has been the most destructive dogma ever created by warped minds of men. And I say men, and I mean men, and I mean mean men. I'll say it again. The doctrine of original sin is the most destructive doctrine that's ever entered this planet by warped minds of men. And if you don't believe Apostle Paul was a control freak, you need to read his letters. 1 Corinthians chapter 4. He writes to the church down in Corinthians, which he established. And he says to them, I sent you my faithful servant Timothy to ensure that you were abiding by my gospel. And he hears back that there's some people down there that are questioning his authority. And he says, am I going to come down there with a whip? Or am I going to come down there in love? Am I going to come with a whip? That is the seed of the Inquisition. If you don't believe what I'm teaching you, I'm going to whip you. I'm going to torture you. That is the seed of the Inquisition. When people are put to death and tortured because they don't believe in the dogma. That's why I'm a Unitarian Universalist. Because I reject that. And my answer to that whole dogma is our first principle. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, not the corrupt nature. The greatest teaching of Jesus, and Lin Yutang says that Jesus never mentions the fall or the original sin or none of that. The greatest teaching of Jesus is the simple words, you are the light. Now, how does that square with the doctrine of original sin? It says you're corrupt at birth, and you're corrupt till you're redeemed by the blood of Jesus. That was the second way that finally God figured out if the law doesn't work, I'll have a human sacrifice. And that'll work. So, how does all of that square with the teaching of Jesus, the core teaching of Jesus found in the Sermon on the Mount? You are the light. And you are the light not only to those around you, you are the light unto yourself. And if you're the light and I'm the light, we're all the light. And we're all one in the light. We're all one in the light. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you because they are you. They are you. We're all in this together, you know. We're all in this together. That's the teaching, the core teaching of Jesus. That is so unlike what we get from Paul. Here's Paul's theology in a nutshell. I'm going to make you sick so that I can give you the medicine. And because I have the medicine, I'm like a pharmaceutical company. I can charge whatever I want for it. I'm serious, folks. You're sick and I have a balm that can cure you. The only salvation, there is no salvation outside of the church. Outside of the institution, outside of the dogmas. That's Paul. He makes you sick before he can make you well. And that's his theology. It's found in chapter 7 of Romans. God said, don't covet your neighbor's house or your neighbor's wife. So it's a law for the men. And we know what coveting your neighbor's wife is all about. Paul says, you know, the harder I try not to covet, I find that I covet. So I covet not to covet. I desire not to desire, therefore I must be desiring. And then his final statement in that chapter 7 of Romans is, wretched man that I am. Wretched man that I am. And that passage, by the way, is not autobiographical, it's universal. You too are wretched until you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and that he died on the cross and paid the price. And that's his theology. And it has nothing at all to do with the teachings of Jesus. The greatest commandment, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, all your mind, love your neighbor. Finish it for me. As you love yourself. And I believe Jesus was working back to the basic fundamental. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to love anybody else. Because you can't give what you don't have. And that doesn't mean egotism. It doesn't mean to be egotistic or haughty or arrogant. In fact, it's very humbling, to love yourself. Because yourself, according to the scripture, this is the other theology, was made in the image of the divine, of the eternal, whatever you want to call it. So, I believe this is universal. This is universal. It's Taoism. It's Taoism. It's Hinduism. It's a universal wisdom that has been passed down through the ages. But anyway, I'm glad we have our principles to remind us of who we are and each other is. Dave was talking about guns and shooting. I heard somebody shooting a machine gun in our neighborhood far off in the woods the other day. And wondered what he's going to hunt with that machine gun. You know? It just seems like to me that we're up against the forces of fear and hatred in this country. And I guess the question for us, are we going to go high or are we going to go low? Are we going to be people of worth and dignity? And are we going to somehow help these people overcome their fear and their hate? Or are we going to participate in it ourselves? And I know it's easy to do that because I want to do that. I want to participate in the hatred that I see on the other side. I want to participate in the fear that I see on the other side. And I get like that. I'll admit that I get that way. I'd like to punch the guy in his face. You know, I'll admit that. But I have to keep telling myself, process through that, till you get to the point where you say, you know, I'm the light, we're the light. Whether we're Unitarian Universalist or Methodist or whatever, we're the light. We have to bring the light and love and compassion into that situation. And we can, because we have the power to do it. Thank you for listening, and what are we going to do now?
We don't have to go.
We're going to sing, but I want you to read these 594. Let's close with the reading 594. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
We believe that each and every person is important.
We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
We believe that all people should be treated fairly.
We affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth.
We believe that our churches are places where all people are accepted and where we keep on learning together.
We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
We believe that each person must be free to search for what is true and right in life.
We affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process.
We believe that all people should have a voice and a vote about things which concern them.
We affirm and promote the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
We believe that we should work for a peaceful, fair, and free world.
We affirm and promote respect for the interdependence web of existence of which we are a part.
We believe that we should all care for the planet Earth.
Thank you. And we're going to close with the song, "The Circle Being Broken." And as always, we invite you to sing along.
I was standing by my window on one golden
Thank you. Richard, how come you get up and dance like you did before? He was dancing to that song this morning. I want to leave you with these words. Deep peace of the running wave to you, deep peace of the flowing air to you, deep peace of the quiet earth to you, deep peace of the shining stars to you, deep peace of the infinite peace to you. And if you'll join with me in these words, as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we begin. Does anyone have any comments, queries, or opposing viewpoints they'd like to share this morning?
I just have a question, Ernie. In the other myths that we know about, is there redemption?
Say that again.
In the other myths that we know about, other cultural myths, is there a myth about redemption?
You know, I think that anywhere there's sacrifices, there's some way, some form of an attempt to try to reconcile. But I have to check that out, the exact notion of buying somebody out of their sin, paying the price for somebody's. I'll check that out. I'll think about that. Good question. Nancy.
You know, what really bothers me is that we commit original sin over and over and over again, and it has nothing to do with sex. It's really the sin of killing each other, and it's called war. And to me, war is the opposite of life. And yet we do this over and over again.
Yeah.
We fight for little pieces of ground, or we fight for some myth that we believe in. That kind of thing. Religions cause wars. Greed has caused wars. There's so many things that are on that other side pushing us over that cliff. And to me, being the light is really important, as you said. Because if you can't find that light within yourself, then it's very difficult to share it with someone else. And that's the important thing, is sharing it. Sharing. Not taking, not coveting, not killing, but sharing. And somehow, we've got to establish some kind of frame of reference and get to yes in this world, or we're just going to ruin everything.
Amen.
Amen. What was that war where the troops fighting each other came out at Christmas and sang hymns together?
World War I.
What was that? Where did that happen? In Italy or somewhere? Or?
It happened along the trenches. It was the French and English soldiers. They heard a German soldier singing Silent Night.
The Christmas troops.
It was the Christmas truce, and they started singing God Rest You Merry Gentlemen back to him, and they actually came out of the trenches and exchanged chocolate and brandy and pictures of each other's families.
Wow.
And their officers were punished for it.
Barbara, you had your hand up.
Every time we start talking theology, I'm always amazed and appalled at the fact that we accept the written word, quotes, as gospel. It was written by people, and people hear things differently and feel differently. And it's no more than a full-blown myth, the entire thing. And it just amazes me that we continue with it. And when I think about some of the stories in it, I'm equally appalled at the idea that something that's supposed to be so much better and such a creative thing practiced sacrifice, human sacrifice. That's what hanging Christ on the cross was. It was a human sacrifice. I don't know, I just get so angry with it all.
Yeah. Mark Twain says the Bible is full of great poetry and clever fables and a wealth of obscenities and some good moral conducts and upward of 1,000 lies.
Great.
We won't get into that right now. Bob has his hand up, and then Sally or Bob.
Got something on that, Mark Twain thing.
Okay, and then Andy over here. Andy had his hand up also. Sally.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Since before I was even a teenager, I was chafed at the idea that I was guilty of something via original sin. And it's always bothered me, and the only argument I've ever heard in favor of the way things shook down since Paul was that original sin and that myth gave the moral authority to the church to impose a code of conduct that kept us civil in the absence of any kind of other legal authority or enforcement. And I've often tried to weigh those two. You know, you said that it was the greatest harm that was ever done was the creation of original sin, but yet on the other hand, how many interpersonal conflicts and community tragedies may have been prevented because people respected the moral authority of the church that was created by originally the seed of original sin.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, did everybody hear that? That's a very good point. Because, I mean, I'll admit that my talk was a little one-sided in favor of the sort of negative, dark side of that, but there is a light, good side. And again, I think it goes back to me, all that goes back to the individual person, the individual people, you know, that make up the institution. And that can go either way, but that's a good point, though. I appreciate you bringing that out. Sally and then Andy.
One correction when you mentioned that children are not being sold. Every year there's 300,000 children sold into trafficking, many coming to the United States, and 2 out of every 3 children are women, girls.
Thank you, Sally. I didn't know that. Andy.
It's terribly simplistic of me, but I think so much of this boils down to human nature's concern with purpose and how that drives us to get to places that somehow solve the question of need to understand why we exist. And I would invite you to make some comment about that in a future service.
I was thinking about it, thinking when people say no pain, no gain, they're still trying to make sense, purpose out of their pain. I grew up with a mother who always said, there's a reason for everything. She always said that. There's a reason for everything. Something happens, you need to find the reason, the purpose. You need to find the reason, the cause that happened. And that was her. She always said that. You know, I'm going to go back to what Rob was saying, because I'll be honest with you all. I have to deal personally with some anger issues I have with the institution of church. And I think that kind of sometimes slants my sermons toward this. Let me tell you, ministry is therapeutic. We're working out our therapy up here. We really are. We're doing our therapy. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
It's therapeutic. It's therapeutic for me to express some of my anger toward the church. And in 1980, I fell victim to what nowadays would be called a series of panic attacks. It wasn't called panic attack in the 80s, but I was having serious panic attacks that wound me up in the hospital, in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. And everybody around me was telling me that I must have offended God. My grandmother, my Southern Baptist grandmother, said I was possessed by the devil. So you can imagine how that made me feel. this, you know, it's either God doing it or the devil doing it, but I was suffering. You know, and at the time, I racked my brain for what I had done to offend God. And I remembered when I was 16 years old, I was building a treehouse, and I hit my finger with a hammer, and I shook the hammer, and I said, and I cursed God.
Right.
And I went back to that. I said, that's why I'm having these attacks, you know. Anyway, so there is anger. There's anger, and I have to deal with that. But I'm glad you pointed that, because there are a lot of good people who identify as Christians, and we need not to forget about that. And there's a lot of good bishops and priests throughout the years who have been good people and try their best, you know. But the opposite is true too. You know, and I was telling Mike that he'd be burned at the stake. Giuliano Bruno questioned the church. He was hung naked, upside down, and then burned at the stake. And that's supposed to represent the Christian church is beyond me, you know. But anyway.
It was enforcement. It was the enforcement of the moral law.
Well, in this case, it
was the only law that existed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you do what they want you to follow the law.
This was enforcement of a dogma, which could be attached to a law. But this was a dogma, Trinity dogma of the earth being the center of the universe. He questioned all. Now, David had his hand up, but we better wrap it up here.
Quickly, further to your Mark Twain discussion about the Bible, I ran across that Mark Twain quote that said, how easy it is to get people to believe a lie, yet how difficult it is to undo that.
Yeah, go ahead and take us home.
It's real quick. I was reading up there about hell and hearing Ernie's remarks, and I thought about a famous theologian whose name I forget now. He said, I had a vision of hell, and there's nobody in it.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think hell is in Gaza right now.